In the sweltering suburbs of Macon, Georgia, a tragedy unfolded that left even the most hardened detectives shaken and speechless. It started with a quiet dinner and a single question. "You ever lie to someone you love?" Rashon asked, his voice low, trembling. Damarion smiled, fork halfway to his mouth. "We all do a little bit, don't we?" Seconds later, there was blood on the walls, a body in the bathtub, and the kind of silence that only comes after something irreversible. But to understand how it got there, how a loving partner became a cold-blooded killer, you have to go back to one humid Georgia afternoon. A routine grocery run. A chance encounter. And a truth so gut-wrenching, so unbelievable, it shattered every illusion Rashon Brevel had about the man he thought he'd spent his life with. What do you do when you find out your partner, the man you sleep beside, build dreams with, is living a second life? A wife. 2 kids. A whole damn family. Hidden in plain sight. How far would you go when the love of your life turns out to be a stranger? Before we get into this disturbing story of double lives, betrayal, and murder, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Because sometimes, the most dangerous lies, are the ones wrapped in love. Rashon Brevel had it all, or so it seemed. 32 years old, living in a sleek loft downtown Macon, Georgia, with exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows, and curated furniture straight out of a GQ spread. He had worked his way up from social media assistant to lead strategist for a top digital marketing firm, with clients who trusted him to build their brands and fix their image. But Rashon didn't need help with his image, he was effortlessly magnetic. Charismatic, smart, stylish. He knew how to turn heads, online and off. But beneath the success, the curated selfies, and the brunch dates, Rashon was just a man in love. He met Damarion on a warm spring afternoon at an LGBTQ+ advocacy event in Atlanta. It wasn't fireworks at first sight, it was something quieter, heavier. Damarion didn't try to impress. He didn't need to. He had that kind of presence that lingered long after he left the room. Tall, soft-spoken, with soulful eyes and a voice that made you lean in. A former track athlete turned nonprofit director, Damarion had the kind of discipline that impressed Rashon, and a touch of mystery that made him irresistible. They bonded fast. Late-night calls that turned into early-morning FaceTimes. Texts that read like poetry. Dates filled with deep conversations about identity, dreams, childhood trauma, and what it meant to be black and queer in the South. Rashon had been in love before, but nothing like this. Damarion made him feel chosen. Protected. Understood. 6 months in, they moved in together. 2 years in, they had matching tattoos, the number 6, for the month they met, inked discreetly behind their ears. Their photos flooded social media. Beaming at pride events, holding hands at HBCU fundraisers, cuddled up on the couch with matching silk robes. They were the couple everyone rooted for. The kind you sent memes to. The kind you copied captions from. People called them goals. They hosted dinner parties with scented candles and charcuterie boards. They volunteered at shelters. They spoke on panels about Black LGBTQ+ love and visibility. Rashon's followers often joked that their love restored faith in humanity. They even hinted at adoption, casual mentions of baby names, photos of nurseries saved to Pinterest boards. But what no one saw, what Rashon himself refused to see, was the shadow growing in the corners. The subtle inconsistencies. The weekends Damarion had to travel for work. The phone always turned upside down during dinner. The sudden mood swings. The emotional distance masked as busyness. Rashon chalked it up to stress. To exhaustion. To life. Because when you love someone, you don't imagine they're lying to your face. You don't picture them slipping off their wedding ring before coming home to you. You don't imagine they have a whole other life. At least, not until the mask slips, and the truth claws its way into the light. Thursday, July 14th was supposed to be just another anniversary. Nothing over the top, just Rashon, Damarion, a quiet night in, and a little love in the air. Rashon had planned everything down to the detail. Steaks marinating in the fridge. A bottle of red wine waiting to be opened. Anita Baker queued up on vinyl. And for dessert, Damarion's favorite, homemade red velvet cake. Rashon was humming to himself as he walked into the Kroger on the east side of Macon, pushing a cart with one hand and scrolling through a recipe on his phone with the other. The store was quiet, the air thick with summer heat and the scent of overripe peaches. He turned down the produce aisle, focused on finding the ripest strawberries. That's when he saw him. Damarion. Standing by the apples. Wearing gym shorts and a Nike hoodie, like he'd just come from a workout. But he wasn't alone. Next to him was a woman in her early 30s. Beautiful. Effortless. She held a toddler on her hip, and a little boy, maybe 5, clung to her hand. Rashon's heart stuttered. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, convinced he was mistaken. But then he saw it, clear as day. Damarion kissed the toddler's forehead, then gently wrapped his arm around the woman's waist like it was the most natural thing in the world. And then she spoke. "Babe, don't forget we gotta be at my mama's by 6. That one sentence didn't just break Rashon's heart, it shattered the entire reality he'd been living in. He didn't confront them. He couldn't. His legs were locked in place. He just stood there behind a display of oranges, watching, barely breathing. They didn't see him. Damarion was laughing, like everything in his world was exactly as it should be. Like the life he shared with Rashon didn't even exist. The woman reached up to adjust Damarion's hoodie. The little boy tugged on his shirt, calling out, "Daddy, look." And Damarion smiled. Rashon followed them. Not closely enough to be noticed, but close enough to confirm it wasn't some horrible coincidence. Out in the parking lot, he crouched behind a row of carts as they loaded groceries into a silver Honda Pilot. License plate, DVS 228. The kids climbed in the back seat, the toddler still giggling. Damarion kissed the woman's cheek, opened her door for her, and got behind the wheel like this was his real life. Like Rashon was just a side story. Then they drove off. Just like that. Like a perfect little family headed to Grandma's house. Rashon didn't go home. He couldn't. He got in his car, hands shaking so badly he could barely get the key in the ignition. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of what he saw. Maybe it was a cousin. A friend. A sister. But no, babe. Daddy. The pieces didn't just not fit, they stabbed him as they fell apart. He drove. He didn't know where he was going, didn't care. Miles blurred past. Highway signs came and went. At some point, he found himself in a Waffle House parking lot off the interstate, parked under a flickering light. That's where the breakdown happened. Full-on sobbing, loud and raw, the kind that doesn't care who's watching. He lit a cigarette, Marlboro Reds, the same brand he smoked in college, the same brand he swore off after his dad died. He hadn't touched one in years. That night, he went through almost half a pack. By midnight, Rashon had stopped crying. Something had shifted. The ache was still there, but it was hardening, crystallizing into something darker. He wasn't going to ask questions. He was going to find answers. Every single one. Because this wasn't just betrayal. This was a whole other life. And Rashon wasn't about to let it stay hidden. Over the next week, Rashon became someone else entirely. The man who once hosted brunches, styled photo shoots, laughed loudly with his friends, and took pride in being soft yet unshakable, he was gone. In his place was someone quieter. Colder. Calculating. Sleep became a distant memory. Meals were forgotten. His once color-coded calendar filled with meetings and dates now sat abandoned. Instead, every spare moment went into the search. His laptop stayed open, tabs multiplying by the hour. His phone, once used to send flirty texts to Damarion, now buzzed only with screenshots, saved links, and notes scribbled in his memo app. He started with the woman's face, seared into his mind from that moment in the Kroger produce aisle. And then, one by one, Rashon began to connect the dots. Damarion had always been careful. Almost too careful. He never posted pictures. Never tagged locations. Anytime Rashon had wanted to go live during their dates or snap a selfie together, Damarion would give him that crooked smile and say, "Let's keep this just for us." Rashon used to think it was romantic. Now he knew it was strategic. But Rashon had a steel trap for a memory. He remembered old tags from parties, barbecues, even vague mentions of a cousin Damarion once claimed he was visiting. It took some digging, but eventually, he found her. Jalen Mercer-Vess. A teacher. A mother. A wife. His wife. Jalen and Damarion. Married since 2013. 10 years. A whole decade. While Rashon had been celebrating 6 anniversaries, Jalen had been celebrating 10. While he was planning a proposal, she was blowing out candles with her kids. Her Facebook was a scrapbook of the life Damarion had kept hidden, cozy and picturesque. Baby showers with blue cupcakes. Backyard birthday parties with balloon arches. Christmas mornings with tiny pajamas and cinnamon rolls on paper plates. One photo showed a summer cookout, a bounce house in the background, folding chairs, red Solo cups, and a banner flapping in the breeze that read, "Happy Anniversary Jalen and Damarion." The caption read, "8 years of love, laughter, and the man who still gives me butterflies." It ended with a hashtag Vess forever. Rashon's stomach turned. Vess forever. That was the tattoo on Damarion's ring finger, the same one he'd once claimed was, for his grandmother. The same hand Rashon had held for 6 years. The same finger that once promised forever to him. His man. Smiling. In love, with someone else. As Rashon looked deeper, he compared time stamps. Matched vacation photos to weekends Damarion had told him he was out of town for a conference. Matched birthday photos of the kids, Nari, age 5, and Dre, age 2, to the weekends Rashon had been ghosted, blocked, or told something came up. And then he saw it, the last piece he needed. A forgotten photo album, buried deep in the Facebook profile of Jalen's cousin. It wasn't tagged. It wasn't recent. But it was there. The wedding. Rashon's breath caught in his throat as he clicked through the album. There was Damarion, standing at the altar in a sharp gray tux, eyes locked on Jalen like she was the only person who mattered. The photos blurred. Rashon didn't even realize he was crying until a tear hit his laptop keyboard. It was all a lie. Every moment. Every "I love you." Every plan for the future. The late nights. Work. The weekend retreats. Activism. The random Uber charges. Helping friends get home safe. He had believed all of it. Every excuse, every omission. Because love does that, it makes you blind to the obvious. And now, standing on the other side of the truth, Rashon saw it clearly, he was the side piece. He was the escape. The fantasy. The thrill Damarion chased when life got too real. Rashon was the man in the shadows, only visible when Damarion wanted to step out of the light. And the most gutting part? Damarion never planned to leave her. Never planned to come clean. Rashon had been building a future with someone who was only renting space in his heart. For days, Rashon couldn't even bring himself to speak. Friends texted. He left them on read. His phone rang, he let it ring. He couldn't talk. He couldn't explain this kind of pain. But then, something shifted. The heartbreak calcified into something darker. He didn't want an apology. He didn't want closure. He didn't even want Damarion's tears. He wanted the truth. Face to face. No more lies. No more gaslighting. And if Damarion couldn't give him that willingly, Rashon would take it. July 28th. A Friday. The heat in Macon clung to the skin like sweat and sin. Rashon cleaned the loft like company was coming, which, in a way, it was. He scrubbed the baseboards. Lit candles. Set the table for two. The playlist was nothing new, Anita Baker crooning through the speakers like she always did on nights that mattered. He even dusted off the wine glasses they only used on anniversaries. A bottle of Pinot Noir chilled beside the sink. Steaks rested on the counter. And in the oven, Damarion's favorite, red velvet cake, with cream cheese frosting. Everything was perfect. Almost too perfect. When Damarion arrived just after 7, nothing seemed off. He kissed Rashon on the cheek, complimented the music, and dropped his keys in the little ceramic bowl by the door like he always did. Rashon smiled, offered him a drink. They talked, they ate, they laughed. On the surface, it was the same ritual they'd performed for 6 years. But underneath Rashon's skin, the rage pulsed. He waited until the wine had gone to Damarion's head, until the second slice of cake was halfway finished. Then he asked it. "You ever lie to someone you love?" Damarion chuckled. "We all do a little bit, don't we?" he said, licking frosting from his fork. That was it. That was the moment. Rashon stood up from the table. Walked to the drawer by the fridge. Pulled out a Glock 19 he bought 3 days earlier from a man who didn't ask questions. He turned, leveled it, and stared straight into the eyes of the man who had shattered his entire reality. Damarion's smile disappeared. "What are you doing?" he asked, rising from his chair. But he didn't make it 2 steps. Pop. 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 3 shots to the chest. No hesitation. No screaming. Damarion hit the ground hard, his wine glass shattering beside him. Blood pooled fast, thick and dark, seeping into the rug they bought together in Atlanta. Rashon stood there, breathing heavy. The smell of cake and gunpowder filled the air. He didn't cry. He didn't shake. He just stared. Then, with a sickening calm, he dragged Damarion's body into the bathroom. Laid him in the tub. Got a knife from the kitchen, his best one, and carved the words liar and forever into Damarion's chest. The letters were jagged, uneven, but legible. Then came the dismemberment. It took 36 hours. Rashon didn't sleep. He worked through the night, the hum of the bathroom fan muffling the wet, horrific sounds of flesh and bone being separated. Trash bags filled with body parts lined the tub. He used bleach to clean the surfaces between each phase. He drove stretches of I-16, tossing bags into ditches, ravines, and behind dumpsters behind abandoned gas stations. He wore gloves. Covered his hair. Left his phone at home. But there was one thing he didn't throw away. The left hand. The one with the Vest Forever tattoo. He dropped it into a mason jar. Filled it with bleach. Screwed the lid on tight. Slid it under the sink like an artifact. A souvenir. To the outside world, Damarion Vess had simply vanished. No one knew yet that his final anniversary dinner had turned into a blood-soaked nightmare. That behind the romantic music and flickering candles, revenge had been simmering, slow-cooked to perfection. It took a week for Damarion to be reported missing. A full 7 days of silence. No texts. No calls. No sightings. On August 4, Jalen walked into the Warner Robins Police Department, visibly shaken. She told officers that Damarion had gone to work the previous Friday, and never came home. He hadn't responded to messages. His phone went straight to voicemail. She tried not to panic, at first. Maybe he needed space. Maybe he was with friends. But when his mother called asking where he was, and even his job said he hadn't shown up, she knew something was wrong. She filed the missing persons report at 2:17 p.m. Less than 2 hours later, Rashon posted a tribute on Instagram. A photo of him and Damarion, taken at Piedmont Park during Pride. Rashon's arms slung over Damarion's shoulder, both of them laughing, wind in their hair. The caption read, "Please come home, baby. I can't breathe without you." He added a broken heart emoji. Friends flooded the post with support. "Praying for you. Hope he's safe. Don't lose hope." Some even messaged Jalen, asking why she hadn't tagged Rashon in her original post. But beneath the surface, the lie was already cracking. Detectives began routine work, checking traffic cams, pinging cell towers, pulling security footage. That's when things started to unravel. From Rashon's apartment building, the lobby camera told a very clear story. July 28, 7:13 p.m., Damarion Vess is seen entering the building, dressed casually in jeans and a black hoodie. He scans into the elevator. He's never seen leaving. Not that night. Not the next day. Not ever. One officer noted how unusually clean the hallway smelled during canvassing. Like pine sol and lemons, she later testified. Another neighbor mentioned hearing music that night, Anita Baker, soft and slow. But no one saw Damarion after that. Then came the gas station footage. A Chevron station off I-16 had cameras pointed at the back lot. On July 30th, around 3:42 a.m., Rashon's black Hyundai pulled into the lot. He got out. Opened the trunk. Hefted out 2 large black trash bags and tossed them into a construction dumpster. He didn't stop for gas. Didn't buy anything. Just drove off. Detectives cross-referenced his car's GPS. It pinged in multiple locations along that stretch of highway, always near industrial bins or wooded areas. That was enough for a search warrant. On August 10, law enforcement entered Rashon's loft. At first glance, the apartment was spotless. Too spotless. Bleach lingered in the air. Scented candles burned in every corner. But under the surface? Chaos. Using luminol, they revealed blood, traces that had soaked deep into the floorboards, especially around the bathroom. The tub, the walls, the sink, everywhere. Behind the toilet, a splatter pattern. Under the tiles, a sticky residue. Then they checked the water heater closet. Hidden behind old cleaning supplies was a hacksaw. Dried tissue. Hair. Blood. But the real horror waited beneath the kitchen sink. There, behind a stack of cleaning wipes and a half-used container of Comet, was a sealed mason jar. Cloudy. Floating in bleach. Inside, a human hand. Pale. Bloated. The flesh rubbery and shrunken from the chemical burn. But one thing was unmistakable. On the ring finger, faded but still visible, was a tattoo. Vess forever. One officer dropped the jar. Another had to step outside to throw up. Forensics later confirmed what everyone already feared. The hand belonged to Damarion Vess. The fantasy Rashon had built was gone. The mask, shattered. Rashon was caught and arrested at 2:43 a.m. on a humid stretch of I-95, not far from the South Carolina border. The headlights of his black Hyundai pierced through the darkness, but everything else around him was a blur of trees and empty highway. It had been a long, silent drive. He'd been on the road for hours, his mind running through everything that had led to this moment, but he didn't seem panicked. Signal of an end. The officer's footsteps were slow and deliberate as he approached the car. He didn't ask questions at first, just tapped the window. Rashon rolled it down. He didn't try to hide his face, didn't look startled by the sirens. He wasn't worried. His expression was emotionless, almost vacant. There was no desperation, no plea for mercy, not even the usual questions of where he was going or why he was on the road in the dead of night. He didn't try to run, even as the officer called for backup. He didn't put up a fight when they cuffed him. He didn't even flinch when the cold steel snapped around his wrists. He simply stared ahead, like someone who had finally been caught after running for so long, but wasn't really sure if they'd been running for the right reasons to begin with. When they asked if he knew why they were pulling him over, Rashon said nothing. He didn't even speak when they read him his rights. There was only one word he muttered on that lonely highway as they loaded him into the back of the patrol car, finally. Then came the trial. The courtroom was silent as Rashon sat, still as stone, waiting for the inevitable. The air was thick with anticipation, the weight of the trial pressing down on everyone in the room. His defense had been clear from the start: insanity. His attorneys argued that the betrayal he suffered had shattered his mind. They painted a picture of a man so deeply humiliated, so emotionally devastated, that his sense of self, his very identity, had collapsed. They claimed it was the unraveling of everything he had built that night, when the love of his life, the man who had promised him forever, revealed he was a lie. A facade. A man with a wife and kids. A secret family. All those years were nothing but a cruel game to Damarion. But the prosecution wasn't swayed. They painted Rashon as a methodical killer, cold, calculating, and precise in his execution. The rage he had felt was real, but it wasn't enough to excuse what he had done. They argued he had planned every detail. The way he had set up the apartment for Damarion's arrival, the calmness with which he executed the murder, and the calculated disposal of the body. It wasn't insanity, it was a decision. A choice. A choice to erase the man who had wronged him in the most intimate way. The trial played out in agonizing detail, each witness offering a piece of the puzzle, each piece slowly revealing the true nature of the man standing trial. But nothing hit harder than Jalen's testimony. When she took the stand, her eyes were swollen, her face blotchy with grief. She hadn't seen it coming. She hadn't known. How could she have known? Jalen's world, her entire marriage, had been built on the lie that Damarion was faithful. She spoke softly, almost as though she didn't believe the words herself. He told me Rashon was just a business partner, she said, her voice breaking. He said they were working on a podcast about queer rights. I believed him. She looked around the courtroom, searching for some kind of understanding, but there was none. Not from anyone. She collapsed when the prosecutor presented the photo, the first image of Damarion's mutilated body. The one with the jagged cuts, the sharp lines that marked the final moments of his life. Jalen's hands trembled as the picture flashed on the screen, and she broke down in front of the jury, sobbing uncontrollably. The truth was too much. The betrayal, the loss, the horror, it all hit her at once. She couldn't stand it, and she couldn't handle it. She fainted right there in the courtroom, her body crumpling into the arms of the bailiff, leaving behind the shattered woman who had once believed she had a perfect life. It was all too much. But even in the face of all that pain, the truth was undeniable. Rashon had planned it. He had chosen to take a life, to take Damarion's life, and when the jury returned after 5 hours of deliberation, the verdict was clear. Guilty. First-degree murder. Abuse of a corpse. Obstruction of justice. There was no room for mercy. There was no sympathy left. Rashon had destroyed everything, not just Damarion, but an entire family, a woman who trusted him, and the future he had dreamed of. When the judge spoke, his voice was heavy with disgust. This wasn't just murder. This was erasure. You didn't just kill a man, Rashon. You erased him from existence. His name, his memory, everything. You took it all away. Life without parole. The sentence was swift, but it was the only one that could be handed down. Rashon's eyes never flickered. He didn't flinch. He simply nodded as if he knew this was where it would all end. He had taken one life, had erased Damarion from the world, and now his own life would be nothing but a shadow. The case didn't end with the trial. It spread like wildfire. The internet split into factions, each side pulling for a different narrative. Some sympathized with Rashon, calling him the victim of manipulation, a man broken by betrayal. Others saw him as the ultimate villain, cold, unfeeling, a monster who chose to destroy everything rather than face the reality of his own pain. Documentaries followed. Podcasts were created. There were think pieces published by the dozens. The loft where it all happened became a macabre tourist destination, people arriving with morbid curiosity, taking photos outside the place where one man's rage had turned into a violent, irreversible act. But the most unsettling part? No one, not even the survivors, could ever walk away from this tragedy with any semblance of closure. Jalen was left to pick up the pieces of a life built on lies. Her children would grow up without a father, without the man they thought was everything they needed. And Rashon, in his cell, would spend the rest of his days with nothing but his memories of a love that was never real. The case, the trial, the aftermath, it all boiled down to one bitter truth. Everyone had been living a lie. And when the truth finally surfaced, it didn't free anyone. It didn't bring peace. It didn't heal. It burned everything to the ground. This wasn't just a story of love gone wrong. It was a slow, psychological implosion, where deception and longing twisted into something monstrous. Rashon didn't just kill Damarion. He obliterated everything they both pretended was real. Was Rashon a heartbroken victim of betrayal, or a narcissist who couldn't handle rejection? And how many others out there are living double lives, waiting for the truth to come crashing in? If this story shook you to your core, make sure you like and subscribe. Because the truth doesn't just hurt, it destroys.